Oh, hello world. I'm just trying to find a happy medium here. I'm in the weirdest spot in my room, so all you get to see is like my TV behind me and the glaring light on my head. It's kind of why I started the video. I'm like, need to work a couple things out. I've also noticed that YouTube isn't notifying anyone, so people don't show up for like, a freaking hour into everything. What's up, slime? So I'm gonna swap up lights and see if that helps because the shit is not working. I feel like, yeah, my butt. I feel like I have like a really shiny forehead that's on display right now. So I'm gonna try to change things up. Not to mention I don't feel so blind. Good afternoon, good morning, or wherever it is that you are at. Today, I was actually inspired by a video I watched last night. Hey, Asher. That Beanie also, as soon as what? Congratulations, Slime. As soon as I put into the community section what I was going to make a video about, Beanie sent me a video from a YouTuber called Nora Jasmine. She wears the tinfoil hat that says "Hear Me Out." And was like, hey, did you see this? Because she just talked about it. I was like, that's so weird because that's actually the whole reason I decided to do this. Not only is it like an issue, right, that's taking place with children being abused in juvenile detention centers, or children being abused in general. When I watched this video that she had sent me, I'd watched it last night. My first thought, because it's all of these, among other things, but it's all of these correctional guards in these facilities being sexual with teenagers that are locked in these detention centers. And the first thing I thought was, wow, what an easy way to be a pedo and get away with it under the guise of taking care of children. I have a funny feeling that this will be one of my first videos on YouTube that might get censored because I'm going to say a whole lot of words they don't like pedophile, and they don't like it when you use the sex word. They prefer if you're talking about uh how do you even do this? You say SA is what they want. And if you're saying, CP, and it even took me a minute to figure out what these fucking things meant when I was watching videos when they changed things. Hold on. Like I said, I'm ill prepared. I seen a video last night where they said that apparently YouTube doesn't let you say, oh, my little speaker's still on, but you guys can hear me. Perfect. YouTube doesn't let you say meth anymore. Metaphile, segs. Okay, all right, yeah. I'm so sick of all the fucking censorship, Canine. It's like, I can show a dog that could potentially kill a child laying in its crib with it. I can't say the word meth, right? They can show, I just can't wrap my head around the world right now. I'm not opposed to anybody's sexuality or life choices or anything. Somehow, like, all of that's okay, but this isn't okay, and I can't say crackhead anymore or sexual assault. You're not protecting anyone by hiding these things. They need to be talked about, you know. Right, show little girls twerking. I totally agree. I don't know, Slime. I don't know. And there's such serious shit going on in the world that needs to be talked about. So I could say that I'm not going to say any of that stuff and try to hide, and it's probably not going to happen. It helps because I'm not monetized, so I don't think we're going to have a huge issue. So, what I want to do is start out talking about the brain and how powerful and amazing it is. Thing is, though, disclaimer before I get into that, not everybody's brain is that powerful, right? I'll use myself as an example, as I like to do, learning from life with Ashley. I don't remember a lot. I went to some therapists and psychoanalysts as a child. I've mentioned before that they actually wrote scientific literature, adult survivors of severe childhood trauma. I actually have it somewhere. I should share it one day. And, this same group of analysts had talked to us as children for the court case we went into, and then came back and found us as young adults. What's up, Yusuf? What's up, everybody? And came back and found us as young adults and asked if they could go back over everything and see what kind of like changes took place. And interesting stuff. One of these doctors told me, because I didn't remember, I still don't remember, like, who knows the percentage? If I were to take a wild guess at it, 70-80% of it. And this doctor tells me, like, actually, it's a sign of a healthy brain. Your brain sees this information and goes, this is useless, I'm going to push it out and make room for new information. They say that you produce a hormone when you have children, when you give birth, that helps you remember helps you forget some of the birth. I can also attest to that. That's true. FF, not free world. So the brain's a magical, powerful thing, but how much? Because even while I can say, like, my brain's pretty healthy and I'm able to push some of these issues out and be healthy regardless, I'm still fucked up. I still have to deal with the after effects of all these things, and I'm almost 40 years old. So these children that I'm about to refer to as teenagers, and I know from being a teenager myself and dealing with a bit of trauma, this shit doesn't go away overnight. And you waste a huge section of your young adulthood trying to figure out stupid, silly shit like, why did this happen to me, and just beating yourself up about it. So when I seen this video yesterday, really compelled me to want to cover this and talk about it and shed some more light on it. Hi Lucy Luce. I'm a small YouTuber, obviously. But the more people that talk about it, the better. And I find that it helps in just general dialogue, like Beanie and I talking about the video we both watched yesterday that got me to make this one, and what have you. I've been going on at funny hours, so only so much shit that's been happening. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to go into some of these articles. I wanted to kind of wait while I was looking at the phone and give a couple people a chance to join in. So the last video I did, it was like 45 minutes into it, and suddenly there's like a whole bunch of people here that didn't get the notification. YouTube's been really good about not notifying anybody. So, hopefully we'll have a couple more people in. I'll sip my coffee. I wanted to kind of chat about that. And the quitting smoking thing. What a pain in the ass. I've learned from talking to a couple people that the first time you quit smoking is not nearly as hard as the second. And I can now attest to that. I quit smoking, 7 years ago, something like that. And it was so easy. I just stayed busy and did what I had to do. It was nothing. I was also younger, right? This time I've quit smoking. Maybe not to mention all the stress I've been under with like finances and breakups and everything else. And just kid and fall break and work and just, it's been wild. Holy fuck. I gained weight. Okay. YouTube's been removing my likes and off of comments. Yeah, I know they're dicks. I've gained weight, so I started having to work out more than ever. And it's like barely keeping up with it, right? Today is my first official day with no cigarettes at all, okay? Because I had been weaning myself down. The idea was like to quit cold turkey, and I got into it that first day, and I was so fucking anxious. But shit kept happening. And, a lot of and I'm not going to harp on it or go into details or anything, but I had that breakup. And as resilient as I am, it doesn't mean that I'm not human, right? I'm human. I have emotions and feelings. I feel things. So I got disciplined but never abused. Glad you're still trying to quit. So am I. It's tough for me. I wish you luck too, Lucy Luce. I'm getting gray hair. I don't know if the flashlight's helping. And I honestly don't mind, right? It's fine. Sorry if I blinded you. But yeah, I use my F YouTube, I agree. I go out on the porch on my deck and I use this mirror out there to do my eyebrows and stuff because I can't see as well indoors as I used to be able to. And I'm looking at it, I'm like, what the hell's that? And I seen a picture of me the other day, and I'm like, I'm getting gray hair. So as I'm using my biotin shampoo, right, that produces hair growth, and everybody's always asking me, "Love your hair, Ashley. How do you do it?" Blah blah blah. Well, careful, because all the new hair that's growing in from using those treatments is turning gray, silver, more correctly, and I would like to share a little joke with you guys, a fun story before we get into something super dark. It's kind of blended with like sadness, right? So we went to that memorial for my deceased neighbor and friend. Okay. And gives one a lot of time to think. It's strange because this place we went to is a place that I have adored for years. And I remember coming through the area I live in many, many, many years ago and looking around. You guys know that picture on my YouTube with the two people on the rock? And that's where I live, right? Right next to there. So I remember looking down at this, driving through here years ago and going, oh, it's so beautiful here. I would love to live here. Oh, wow. And now I live here, right? So I consider myself pretty fortunate. Also, I've worked really hard. So it's this beautiful place. And for her memorial, we're down at this area right on the river, and they're spreading her ashes into the water and everything else. And her husband's memorial was at the same exact place. And I'm thinking to myself, like, wow, I for years wanted to live right here and be here. I loved it so much. And they stayed here even after traveling and liked living here so much that they want their ashes dumped in this place that I also adore, right? And I'm going, oh my God, this is, huh. So I have this thing I want to do when I die. And so I just kind of changed it up. So anyways, we were riding home, and I'm with a friend of mine and her father. And she says, Dad, like, what do you want for your memorial when you pass? Maybe it's a good time to talk about it. And I'm sitting in the back seat. And he goes, oh, honey, I don't care. He kind of just shrugs it off. And I said, some people really don't care, and others are very specific and want very specific things. And they're like, yeah. And he's basically like, whatever makes you guys comfortable. You're the ones who are still alive. And so I slowly lean up into the front seat between the two of them, and I look back and forth. So I'm a very comical person. It doesn't matter how dark it is. And I go, well, isn't anybody going to ask me what I want to happen when I die? And they both go, yes, what is it? What would you like? I'm like, okay, listen, I want to be cremated from the neck down. And they're like, what? And one of them's like, Ashley, please don't. I'm like, oh, save that for when you're holding my head. Okay. So you cremate me from the neck down. Then you have to hold my head and you have to talk to it. And you're going to say something, like, Ashley, I really wish you wouldn't make me do this, right? I want you to stand out on the dock and punt my head into the water. And everybody at my funeral will be out there playing like water volleyball, right? And you have to keep my head up. And if you let it drop, you're out. And then whoever is left standing last gets to have all my stuff. And she's like, oh my God, don't you have a family member to do this for you? I'm like, I don't, right? And her father says, I kind of like that idea. I said, oh, you can use it. He's like, oh, I'm not stealing it from you. I'm like, it's not called stealing. It's called sharing, right? And we had I don't know how dark everybody else's sense of humor is, but yeah, I'm pretty ate up, and that's how I cope with things. It's kind of freaky but unique. I'm a weirdo, so but it's we had a really good laugh, and we were really happy and excited for her, and how beautiful everything was, and the people that showed up, and the area is just lovely. And it really got me to thinking, like, geez, I really friggin' love it here. And I fought so long and so hard to be here, and I'm so friggin' happy, and I love my community, and so I'm just well settled. So now that we've discussed all that, let's go ahead and hop into this. And I was wondering if we were going to see Beanie pop in. She might be busy. Don't mind me. I've been working around the yard and shit. Oh, and I also, this week, I have a story to cover from Morpheus Christos, as you I will do this one at nighttime because I know he works during the day, and I would like for him to be able to attend. So what I'm going to do is, let's see, it's Wednesday. Maybe tomorrow night, I will email him and find out what time works best for him, and we're going to cover the Oksala Malaya story about the young girl who was raised around dogs and became rather feral. So it's a lot of stuff about kids this week, but important that people need to talk about more, which is why I wanted to talk about this. So what I'm going to do is just share a couple articles with you and a little bit of my personal view. You guys feel free to share. And as usual, and I'm sure Asher can throw up the email, as usual, if you have any stories you'd like to share or keep them anonymous or what have you, please send them my way. Email me. We also have that Facebook page. If you guys haven't joined it, please do that. That's based off of, hating dogs. So I'm kind of covering multiple areas now, and I like it. My friends on the Sober channel are doing the same thing. They're like, hey, we've been at this for 4 years. Now we're going to start talking about health and wellness and exercise and how to take care of yourself. And I love it. I looked up some recent articles on this as well because I wanted a little more up-to-date information. This has been going on for a really long time. And the story that I watched last night was based off of the death of a whistleblower in Georgia who had spoke out about the abuse and ends up being beaten up and dying. Okay. According to the Children's Defense Fund, the American justice system arrests and detains almost 2,000 people under the age of 18 every single day. This was in 2018. So for more than 700,000 children were arrested in 2018. On any given night, facilities house over 40,000 children, and about 1,000 are held in adult prisons. This trend is reinforced by the school-to-prison pipeline. Whole nother story that definitely needs to be covered. When students interact with the justice system inside of schools, they are more likely to go to prison. Ultimately, sending young people to prison perpetuates a significant problem: the abuse of incarcerated juveniles at the hands of prison staff and other incarcerated individuals. And let me just throw something in. I've not been shy about this. I have been arrested a lot. I was heavily abused, as I've referred to, child. And when I got old enough, I started fighting everybody, including myself. I never got in trouble for any thefts and no shit like that. It was all fighting. Fighting myself, fighting everybody else, fighting strangers and motherfuckers, just fighting all the fucking time. And I got in trouble a lot. I ended up becoming a felon. I have not been quiet about this. And even as I've had probation, parole officers and stuff throughout my life, there was a point where I changed my life. I got sober. My substances were making it worse. I had to accept my childhood and past and lack of family. And I had to break a generational cycle. Upon doing some ancestry with a friend of mine, we found out that we could trace my family names back 11 to the 1100s. And they were all wild criminals and nut jobs. Perhaps I am breaking a cycle that's almost a millennia old. Think about that. Pretty impressive shit. Wasn't easy. And I'd mentioned to some of these officers, that I've been, they make it impossible. At a certain point, I stop and go, why am I doing this? I should continue being a criminal. Just easier. You guys aren't going to let me change. No one's ever going to let me live this down. And they agreed. It's tough to find a job, tough to live. And so when you start out this shit with kids, from the prison system to the pharmaceuticals to whatever it is, it's a really hard habit to break. And at a certain point, you stop and go, why? Why the fuck am I trying? So, okay. Incarcerated youth experience high rates of sexual abuse. Young people are extremely vulnerable to various types of abuse during incarceration. One report found that almost 1 in 10 incarcerated juveniles report sexual abuse in juvenile correctional facilities. You gotta remember, these are the ones that are reporting it. Okay? The rates are nearly 3 times higher in facilities that house more than 25 juveniles at one time. The report further highlights ongoing problems with sexual abuse of incarcerated youth dating back more than 40 years. Like I said, this has been going on a long time. Statistics around sexual abuse in prison are inherently problematic because incarcerated individuals get grossly underreport sexual victimization. Like I said, This suggests the rate of sexual abuse among incarcerated youth may be much, much higher than the Bureau of Justice Statistics data shows. Same research study shows that LGBTQ youth are more likely to experience abuse during incarceration. Boys most often experience abuse from other incarcerated individuals, and females are more likely to experience sexual abuse from the prison staff. Sexual abuse is so prevalent in juvenile facilities that the Office for Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention developed standards and a guide to help ensure compliance with the Prison Rape Elimination Act. The office helps fund efforts to prevent sexual abuse of incarcerated juveniles. When states fail to comply with the PREA standards, they risk losing some of that funding. Still, sexual abuse remains a major problem in some states. A federal report, I've found multiple states, found that about 1 in 7 incarcerated youth in Texas, for example, experienced sexual abuse during incarceration. The states I seen that popped up the most were like Georgia, Tennessee, but Texas, was crazy. Physical and sexual abuse in juveniles trigger past traumas and contribute to depression. Okay, so that's pretty fucking obvious. Sexual abuse is far from the only problem facing young people impacted by the justice system. Youth are also subject to solitary confinement, physical abuse during confinement, and juvenile detention facilities overuse solitary confinement as a disciplinary measure. This is a major concern among scholars who wrote that neurological research and sociological studies confirm what common sense tells us. Isolating youth for days and weeks at a time has devastating long-term effects on their health and development. According to researchers, solitary confinement remains a common disciplinary practice, and prison staff target specific populations. Okay, so the case of Khalif Browder gained national attention after Browder spent more than 800 days in isolation while awaiting trial. Though Browder showed no signs of mental illness prior to incarceration, the trauma of solitary confinement pushed him to kill himself just months after release. Despite evidence that isolation counteracts rehabilitation efforts in juvenile facilities, prison staff rely on the practice. Scholars and activists insist that juvenile facilities should eliminate the practice entirely. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the next article as they move on into a couple other things here. Okay, so let me get in, and I'm going to stop and check out your comments right quick and what we've got going on over here. F YouTube. So I agree. Oh, that scared the shit out of me. And then they changed their mind and hung up. Cremation is cheaper. Put ashes in an hourglass and still compete in family games. What family, Lucy Luce? Oh, my email, thank you. My weirdo neighbors share the same mutt. Ew! I think I know exactly what you mean, too. No, solitary is not illegal. I've been put in it several times. Sometimes it's, depending on how long you use it. The thing is, though, it's such a complex situation. It can be used in an effort to calm this person down or to isolate them from the rest of the population while they're having a moment, right? But, it's kind of counterproductive to getting someone calmed down. It's hard to find the right answer, especially when there's lack of funding. And, some of these officers mean well. They're not like molesters or bad people. And some of them, may have went into it meaning well and got kind of calloused and beat down throughout the system. It's such a complex situation. How juvenile lockup sets kids on a path to commit more violence. I think this is important to talk about. One telling of Terrence Audris' story, the version that prosecutors focused on when they convinced a jury to send him to death row, begins in 2008 when the 20-year-old, high on PCP, tried to steal a cars in Houston suburb and ended up shooting and killing 2 people. Once again, these are complex situations. We're talking about a young man, but he killed people. I'm not throwing my opinions into this because honestly, I don't have any space specifically off of each situation. Since then, his lawyers have been telling a story that starts much earlier, writing in court files about the parental neglect and psychosis that marked his childhood. 4 years before the murders, the state had a chance to help him. Here's another issue. When he was arrested for robbery and sentenced to a juvenile prison, which aimed on paper to provide the 16-year-old with education, treatment, and life skills. This is a huge issue, not even depending on age, as to getting the mental health that we need. Once again, a severe lack of funding and ability to reach out and help people properly. Instead, Audrus was exposed to gangs, dosed on psychotropic drugs, and tossed in solitary confinement more than 77 times, sometimes at his own request. In a separate scandal shortly after he left, the state overhauled its juvenile prison system after revelations that Texas Youth Commission's top administrators were sexually abusing some of the youths in their care. Revelations that Texas Youth Commission's top administrators. Audrus's case is the most recent example of a narrative familiar to legal and medical experts, in which a victimizer was first a victim of a dysfunctional and abusive juvenile institution run by the state. Prosecutors often weaponize these childhood traumas, saying that the state tried all these things to help and it didn't work. So these boys just are inherently evil. I will say, you go from an abusive childhood to an abusive juvenile system through a gamut of therapists and psychoanalysts and on into adulthood, where you're just trying to figure out what to do, and you may not have been taught because your parents were abusive and sick, mentally ill. My parents were mentally ill, and it took me years to figure it out. Now I'm a great person. Had I not had the chance to make those changes, who knows what would have happened to me. All right. Audrus's case is the most recent example. Marshall Project found a dozen cases of death row prisoners who previously spent time in youth lockups. Most were in Texas, where such facilities have been plagued by abuse for decades. In October, federal prosecutors announced a new round of investigations into all 5 of the state's youth prisons. U.S. Supreme Court has been unsympathetic to death row prisoners in recent years, declining to stop any of the 13 executions pursued by the Trump administration. So it was all more notable in 2020, and the court ruled in Audrus's favor, ordering a Texas state court to reconsider his claims. Audrus has argued that his original trial lawyer failed to adequately tell jurors about his past. The state court pushed back, ruling against Audrus, and now his lawyers are asking the justice system in Washington to intervene again. In a recent interview, Audrus did not seek to excuse the actions that got him to death row, but he talked about a court hearing 5 years ago that featured testimony about his time in youth prisons. I had never connected the dots, he said, but that's when I knew it essentially had a big influence on my mind and how it worked. Sitting nearby, his lawyer, Gretchen Swain, said she felt physically ill and complicit as a voter, a taxpayer, upon hearing what he was subjected to in juvenile prisons. Lawyers in other cases have come to similar conclusions about how juvenile institutions contribute to crime. When John Grant was executed in Oklahoma last October for the 98 murder of a prison worker, his lawyer, Sarah Jenigan, wrote in a press release of how Grant had stolen to provide for his impoverished siblings as a child. And there. He was sentenced to a juvenile facility and faced beatings, rapes, and extended periods in solitary confinement. So it goes from him stealing a little food to feed his siblings, which I have also done, to being raped and beaten and tortured and in solitary confinement. We must not forget Oklahoma's hand in this tragic story, she concluded. U.S. has been locking up kids for more than a century, generally with bad results. According to Bush the historian, the first reform school started in the Northeast in 1830s and aimed to rehabilitate troubled city kids through communion with nature. I feel like there's so many better ways we could be doing this. What's up, Kai? Good to see you. Oh, geez. Hey. Today I watched the news where cat owner shot 2 pit bulls to save his cat. One died, the other survived. Unfortunately, it was still worth it. Fair enough. All right, so I'm going to get into another story, as I do have a couple of things I have to deal with today. But I really wanted to cover this topic. I felt it was very important. Hundreds claim decades of abuse by 150 youth center staffers. Okay? Abuse allegations against New Hampshire's state-run youth detention center have grown to include 230 men and women who say they were physically or sexually abused as children by 150 staffers. Okay. Abuse allegations against New Hampshire state-run youth detention center now span 6 decades, with 150 staffers during that time accused of physically or sexually harming 230 children at a facility the victim's attorney calls a magnet for predators. And as I said, first seeing it, I was like, what a great way for someone to commit pedophilia and hide under the guise of helping. Oh, no, I'm a corrections officer for messed up children. They'll immediately feel, sad for the officer because they assume this job is terrible, in which it is. I'm sure there's a lot of damaged children, but you don't get to hear about the stuff that they're doing. Russ Riley had sued the state in January of 2020 on behalf of 3 dozen adults who alleged they were abused as children at the Youth Development Center in Manchester between 1982 and 2014. He now represents 230 clients who say they were abused between 1963 and 2018, ranging from the ages of 7 to 18 years old. This is all one facility. As the number of years accusers and alleged perpetrators have swollen, so too is the sickening nature of the allegations. While details beyond the updated number of accusers and time span aren't included in the latest court documents, Riley plans to add his clients' accounts to the complaint and describe them to the Associated Press. Of the 150 accused staffers, more than half were accused of sexual abuse. Children were gang raped by counselors, beaten while being raped, and forced to sexually abuse one another. Some ended up with sexually transmitted diseases, and one ended up pregnant. Staff members choked children, beat them unconscious, burned them with cigarettes, broke their bones. Counselors set up fight clubs and forced kids to compete for food. Children were locked in solitary confinement for weeks, months, sometimes shackled, strapped naked to their beds, kept away from classrooms while their injuries healed. Some cannot read and write to this day. These broken, shattered children were then unleashed into society with no education, no life skills, and no ability to meaningfully function. The Manchester facility, now called the Sunamou Youth Services Center, after former Governor John H. Sunamou serves children ordered to a secure institutional setting by juvenile justice system. The average population last year was just 17 residents overseen by about 90 employees, though it once housed upward of 100 youths and employed a larger staff. Joe Ribson, director of the State Division for Children, Youth, and Families, said the agency continues to cooperate with a broad criminal investigation into the center launched by Attorney General's office in 2019. He did not comment on the new allegations. It's unclear how far up the chain of command knowledge of the alleged abuse traveled over the years, but the lawsuit alleges that some supervisors were themselves abusers and other staffers would look the other way. The systematic governmental child abuse that occurred was allowed to occur because there wasn't sufficient oversight and the state was institutionally negligent in their hiring, training, supervision, and retention policies. It's pretty clear to me that this facility was a magnet for predators. Riley said most of his clients have spoke to state police as part of the criminal investigation, including one man who spent 2 years at the facility in the late 2000s. The man alleges he was sexually assaulted by 2 staffers more than half a dozen times, was beaten by 6 staff members at once, and often locked in his room for a week at a time. Now 28 years old, he has been in and out of the criminal justice system most of his life and has struggled with depression, strained relationships, and a warped sense of socially acceptable behavior. The kids that don't have it good in there, we don't come out good, he said. It takes a part of you, the worthlessness you feel afterward. Am I good enough for people? Am I good enough for myself? Another man, now 29, spent more than a year at the center starting in 2007. He alleges he was beaten several times and sexually assaulted by 3 different staff members, dozens of times, including a sexual assault that he says was recorded on a perpetrator's cell phone. After years of substance abuse, he has been clean for 7 months, but the nightmares and other PTSD symptoms continue. I relive it a lot, every night, every other night. It never stops, he said. I hope this young man understands that with time, he can heal. Neither of them have any records of their time at the center, though they said they've requested them and gave state police officers who interviewed them permission to do the same. That's half the battle here. Meehan, 39, went to police in 2017 with allegations of abuse from the 1990s. In July 2019, 2 of his former counselors were charged with 82 counts of rape, and the Attorney General's office launched a broader criminal investigation into the center's operations and employees from 1990 to 2000. Those charges were dropped last March when the office announced it was devoting an unprecedented allocation of resources and expanding investigation, including assigning 10 state police troopers to a task force. Meanwhile, the state has been granted several extensions in responding to the lawsuit, and as recently as January in court documents, the parties were in discussion aimed at narrowing and resolving the matters and issues in this case. It's a fancy way of saying, let's get this dealt with so everyone will shut the fuck up. I'm not wrong, okay? So it's a power dynamic in these youth centers. Authority and combined with that, mentally broken youth, it's going to get worse before it improves. Absolutely. And, canine constrictor, I know you don't, well, not that I know, but I don't believe you have worked in the facilities, but you have a pretty broad understanding of this. I know, as being a kid in these situations, that I would often see the same cops over and over. And, there's not much they can do until there's enough charges and issues going on. And even then, your power is somewhat limited and resources are limited and funding is limited. And, it's such a multi-leveled, multi-layered situation that is so freaking sad. And I just feel like there's so many other ways to deal with this, and we just haven't explored any of those avenues. And so let's go on into, I believe I have one more story, maybe two. And I know that this is kind of a niche thing. There's a lot of people that don't want to hear this. And so they, it might not be a lot of views on this video. Oh, and it's Golden Eagle's birthday too, so I've got to say something to her today. But yeah, I mean, so I get it. It's an uncomfortable thing. A lot of people don't want to hear about this kind of stuff. You can do like one video about a dog and get this many views. It could be a video about, the monkeys killing the dogs and it gets this many views. You could say we're talking about, the art of communication and people take it this way. So it's fine. All right, here's our last article. And this came as recent as April in 2022. Teens allege abuse and neglect inside a state-run juvenile detention facility in West Tennessee. Teenage boys inside a state-run detention facility say they experienced physical and sexual abuse by staffers. They report being put on isolation, which also made them suicidal. They were denied medical care and therapy services, and when their families tried to raise the alarm, they were retaliated against. These are just a few of the allegations that a monitoring group called Disability Rights of Tennessee uncovered in their visits to the Wilder Youth Development Center in West Tennessee since September of 2020. So within 2 years, under 2 years. In a report that was released Wednesday, the group says it found violations of both state and federal laws. While Wilder is the last detention facility run by Department of Children's Services in Tennessee, attorney Brian Blalock with the Youth Law Center says these findings will have serious implications for the rest of the state. In the process of compiling this report, we've heard from young people that it makes it seem like Wilder is not really much of an outlier. Blalock says that many of the teens have been in other detention facilities before and say they had similar conditions. So when they try to isolate and speak about one detention facility, we're actually talking about the majority of them. The majority of these young people in Wilder's care are Black and disabled. Instead of receiving mental health treatment, many of the teens reported being prescribed psychotropic drugs. And they do this with the foster care system. They do it in the detention facilities. In the detention facilities, you have like a guinea pig that could be willing or unwilling, and there's no parents that can step into the jail and intervene and say no. With the foster care facility, you have no parents around to intervene and say anything. This is a perfect breeding ground for pharmaceutical drug testing without consent. because someone else has consent for this child, this teenager, right? And that's a whole another video that I would love to talk about at some point. Teens at Wilder also reported deteriorating conditions of the facility. In one case, a teen described being in solitary confinement cell for 23 hours a day, which smelled like urine and was infested with cockroaches. Another described lying on the ground and being kicked, hit, and stood on by staff. He reported feeling like he couldn't breathe, and others describe a male staff member watching as they showered, commenting on their genitals. Records show that from 2019 to 2020, and can I just point out, like, dudes messing around in a locker room and shit is like one thing. Adults talking about children in a locker room is quite another. Records show that from 2019 to 2020, 300 grievances were filed by young people at the facility, but there were only 3 hearings in response to the complaints. In a statement to WPLN News, Sandra Brandon with Department of Children's Services said some of the concerns raised in the report have already been addressed. Employees who did not follow policy and procedure guidelines have been terminated, she wrote in an email. Renovations have started on the building to update outdated dorms, bathrooms, and common areas. However, DCS does not agree with some aspects of the report. They understand the challenges of providing a secure environment while also providing rehabilitative services to violent teen offenders. Right now, there are under a few dozen 14 to 18-year-olds in Wilder's care alone. Disability Rights Tennessee is advocating for changes at the facility, including a streamlined process for reporting abuse, holding staff accountable, and ending solitary confinement. So as Kai said, a lot of people believe that it's been ended and it hasn't. So, funky time of day. I got much love for y'all. I am going to go and eat some lunch and exercise because that's how I've been quitting smoking. And I am ready to do some exercising. And my son's off for fall break, so I can't go take a jog or ride my bike. So I'm trapped in the house. But I will be covering that story that Morpheus sent to me tomorrow night. I appreciate all of you for being here. Very happy to see you, K9 Constrictor, Asher, Kai, Lucy Luce, all of you. So nice to see you. Take care, and until next time, protect yourself. Stay away from these filthy fucking dogs, especially when you don't know them. We've talked about this. And, yeah, whole nother video right there. Anyways, have a good one. Slime, have a good day. I'm glad you're bonding with your mother. And everybody, take care.